Hey, what's up? It's Matt, and today I am talking about an article called Role-Based Design, A Contemporary Perspective for Innovation in Instructional Design by Brad Hokanson, Charles Miller, and Simon Hooper. This article is all about how instructional designers have not recently made any huge leaps forward in designing instruction or facilitating learning. They're essentially getting stuck and maybe complacent with the same old methods they've used previously, and this isn't good for the field or the people which the field is supposed to help. One example of this is a design framework known as ADDIE, which is almost like a recipe for instructional design, in that it says do this, then do that, etc. The authors analogize an instructional designer using ADDIE to a chef following a recipe book. If you're a novice, you're just going to do the recipe book as is because you don't really know a lot and you don't deviate from the recipe that you are following. But if you're an expert cook, and we want expert instructional designers, then of course you're going to not do exactly what the cookbook says, because you have your own knowledge you can impart to the overall process. To remedy this outdated and perhaps rigid paradigm, the authors propose using a role-based framework to look at how to create better instructional design. Under this proposed model, designers should assume certain roles to gain new perspectives with which to critique their own and others' work. Roles are intentionally romanticized to highlight the diverse values and philosophies that other professions can bring to the field of design. Specifically, these roles are the instructional artist, the instructional architect, the instructional engineer, and the instructional designer. Let's briefly review those. The artist is essentially an artist, thinking outside of the box to generate a bunch of really creative and different ideas. These ideas might not work at all and frequently should deviate from the norm, because this is how really crazy ideas are generated, and oftentimes crazy ideas can be just what we need. The architect looks beyond just the immediate problem we are trying to solve. They look at how generated ideas and solutions can broadly enhance learner experiences, instead of just the specific problem in which we had originally worked. This involves asking questions like, what is the true nature of the problem, and what is the bigger question we face at hand? The engineer evaluates the implementation constraints that we may experience in implementing the design, the same way perhaps a civil engineer would make sure a bridge succeeds and does not crumble. The engineer's ultimate goal is to ensure that the product of design is usable by the target audience and that it reaches its expectations. The engineer brings qualities like efficiency and planning and organization. Now, the craftsperson is the one who ultimately creates the design that is to be implemented. But unlike a manufacturer who would simply create something as they are told, the craftsperson is someone who improves the design process as it goes. They have a lot of experience from working in this field for a while, and they value the product, the final creation, just as much as the user experience. So those are the four roles, and again, those are the four roles, and the idea isn't necessarily that you want to bring 4 people together to work on a design team, though that probably wouldn't be a bad thing, but rather that you should try to encompass each of those, right? Role play, like a video game, because when you get in a different mindset, it becomes easier to generate new, or at least different ideas, and those can bounce off one another and create something new and better. There also isn't really an order to which you should role play, again, just that you get the philosophies and values of each role considered in the design process. There's a phrasing used in this paper that I like a lot, and I'm going to end my summary with this. The ultimate aim of design is simply not to polish and refine something that has already existed, but rather to change the status quo, create something totally new. Alright, so now my reactions to the paper. I like it a lot. I think it's really good to try to get different perspectives when you're looking at design, because if you get stuck in the same way of thinking for a long time, you're gonna run into obstacles. It's the nature of just, I guess, having a narrow field of expertise. There are 2 points in this article I want to address, though. The first of which is we are supposed to obviously take on these other roles. But what if you don't necessarily have the training to do one of those roles? For example, while I think everyone has the potential to have the mindset of an artist, generating lots of divergent ideas and almost encouraging failure in a lot of ways, that's difficult to get into that mindset. Obviously, with some research, they could probably work it out, but assuming the role of an artist could be very difficult if you've never really done artistic type work like that before. Frankly, assuming any of these roles could be a little difficult if you've never done some of the work that an engineer or an architect characterizes. The other thought this paper has given me is it talked a lot about how novices almost need to follow that cookbook, right? That recipe, because they don't really have the knowledge to start making changes right from the get-go. Well, I'm wondering if there's a way to impart that knowledge to them so that perhaps novices can start off on a better foot than they would otherwise. This, of course, leads me to think, well, is there a way to gain this sort of very specific experience type knowledge without doing it? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe it's yes, maybe it's no. I imagine that a mentoring relationship with someone who has been in the field for a while would certainly help, but a certain part of me also thinks that in a lot of ways you just have to do things to know what they're really like. For that reason, perhaps it is necessary for someone to follow the cookbook for the first, 3, 1, 5 years of his or her career. But I would also love to see sort of metacognition in that they recognize when they're following something to the recipe, and they can recognize when they have enough skill to move on. I think that'd be really beneficial to them. Alright, well those are my reactions. This was my reaction paper video. It's a little late, but I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you later.